Welcome to the Driving for Dollars podcast, the place to be for house flipping tips, tricks, and advice that's raw and unfiltered, but works. Learn to generate more leads and deals through our marketing expertise. Now, let's get into the show. What's up, guys? This is episode number 3 of the Driving for Dollars podcast. Hey, I want to thank you guys for joining me. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the show. It's a new show in iTunes, and because it's a new show, we want to make sure that we work over the iTunes algorithms as best as possible and get as many of you guys subscribing in a short period of time as possible. So if you have not already, make sure you go hit that subscribe button. And in return, I'll make sure that I try and deliver you guys the best content that I can, as well as really cool tips on how to more effectively utilize our Driving for Dollars app to make you a better investor, get better deal flow, and ultimately more deals and more money. All right, so this week's show and today's show, I should say, and moving forward, I'm going to break it up into kind of 2 sections. Number 1 is going to be content tips on basically using Driving for Dollars to better generate leads and deals and money. And then the second part is going to be a quick tip on how to better utilize the app so that you're familiar with it and so that you can utilize it to the maximum of its capabilities. Because as we've kind of figured out in this whole app building game, we design it for a lot of stuff, but we know it inside out and backwards. And for those of you that are just starting to use it or have just downloaded it, you just don't know it as well as we do. And so we want to give you a platform or a resource to be able to listen to kind of help you guys get the most value out of it as possible. So I want to start off with building Driving for Dollars lists and the types of lists that you should build. And so in my market here, Portland, Oregon, and in many of your guys' markets across the country, it's kind of a dynamic market in terms of the price points of certain areas, right? So as you get better at becoming a real estate investor and understanding different areas and understanding price points within those areas, you start to really recognize which areas can absorb new construction, right? Where redevelopment can occur. And then it's more obvious to you also which areas where redevelopment maybe can't occur in terms of new construction or lot splitting and building new houses. Prices are low enough that it's simply a rehab only type area. And so in the city of Portland here, the closer you get into the city, the higher the prices are. And the higher the prices are, the more an area is able to absorb new construction. And so if you're in an area that can absorb new construction, it allows you to pull different types of leads, or at least look at properties with multiple opportunities versus one. So as you get farther and farther away from the city core here in Portland, for example, the price points get lower and lower. And so after you get across about 82 blocks out from the city of Portland, on the east side, let's say, new construction just isn't as feasible because prices are lower. So when we do Driving for Dollars in areas where new construction isn't feasible, we're looking purely at rehab type plays. Whereas if we're doing Driving for Dollars closer in and we're building lists for pockets that are a little bit higher price point or much higher price points, now we look at properties both in terms of the rehab that can occur to the existing structure, but also the redevelopment that can occur to the land in general. So if it's a lot that, let's say, is a 15,000 square foot lot, there's a house that's tucked all the way to one side or the other, and the underlying zoning here in Portland is R5, which means the minimum lot size has to be 5,000 square feet. That's potentially a 3-lot redevelopment where you could keep the house, renovate it, and create 2 additional lots and build 2 new houses. Or you could scrape the house, split the lot into 2 more lots, keep the original lot, and then you have 3 lots that you can build on. So recognizing those opportunities really boils down to recognizing and understanding the price points in any given area that you're doing Driving for Dollars. And that's why we always say, you should map out your areas before you start driving so that you know exactly what it is that you're looking for in any given area. We don't just drive willy-nilly all over town. We'll pull up, Google Maps, we'll print it out, and we'll map out an area that basically says, okay, we're going to drive this pocket here in this part of town, and these are the types of leads that we're going to be able to get out of this area based on the price points. And so we do some price point research ahead of time if we're not super familiar with the areas. Fortunately, I know Portland like the back of my hand now, and I know price points in virtually every part of Portland. But if you don't, you can use resources like Redfin. That's a great resource to kind of hop on there and do an overhead view of the area that you're looking at potentially driving. Look at what's for sale, look what's pending, look what's sold, and really get an idea for whether or not that area has price points that warrant new construction. And then you can kind of pull leads accordingly, or you know what you're looking for, right? You know that if it's a higher price point area, and you find a big lot with a little house on it, there's a lot of extra value that could be created there through redevelopment. Whereas if it's like a low-end, kind of lower price point area where maybe new construction hasn't come into yet, if you see that little house on a bigger lot, it's really probably just a little house on a bigger lot still that needs to be renovated and sold as that. So there's ways to kind of view the leads based on how mature the area is and how in demand it is, which ultimately means how expensive it is or isn't. So that's kind of the important thing to remember when you're creating Driving for Dollars lists. I highly advise you segment it up based on different types of areas and different types of product that can then be delivered to the retail market in those areas. And then, of course, as you pull leads, you recognize that when you look at the rough lead, which is a Driving for Dollars lead, which is either beat up or oversized lot or just an underutilized piece of property. So that's my tip today in terms of just utilizing Driving for Dollars to better help your lead flow and your deal flow. Now, the tip for using the app today is going to be save your work, folks. If you're driving around, you create a list, and let's say you got 30, 40, 50 properties on there. Before you exit the app, or even if you got multiple hundreds on there, Dan usually will knock out like 100, and then what you need to do is save your work. So think about it like Microsoft Word, right? You go into Word, you write a document, you don't want to close Word without saving your work. And so before doing that, you should always just save it periodically as you go. Save it before you take another phone call, save it before you exit the app and go into another app, save it before you go into Facebook or whatever, Instagram. So if you're in the app building a list, just save the list periodically as you are building your list. That way you don't potentially lose your data. So there's nothing worse than driving around for a while and then losing your data. We are eventually going to create a server where basically it stores any pins that you drop regardless of whether you save it or not, but it's a really expensive project and it's a big thing to build out, and it's easy to work around for the time being. So it's on the list of improvements over time, but it's easy to work around it too. All you got to do is just save your work periodically as you're putting together your list. So make sure that you do that. Like I said, it'll be a future enhancement, but for the time being, all you got to do is just save your list as you continue to build it. If you have an iPhone version, you can basically save the list, start a new list, and then as you continue driving for dollars in whatever area, and you can combine those lists when you're done. There's a tutorial all about that on our Facebook page. But if you have a Android phone, you can basically just open that list back up and edit it and add to it. So two ways to kind of continue forward. But anyway, that's the app tip for today's show, and then also just a little insight on creating Driving for Dollars lists based on different parts of town. So hopefully you guys can use both tips into making you a better investor and better at utilizing Driving for Dollars to increase your lead flow and your deal flow moving forward. So this is episode 3. Again, go subscribe to the podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next show.